Alright, folks, today we are diving for Manila clams. That is right, we are diving for Manila clams because we are divers. We don't wait for fishing poles, we don't wait for crab traps, we don't even wait for the tides. With that being said, some of the things you do before you go clamming. Uh, Check the tides. Uh, what I mean is, I prefer an outgoing tide for clamming. That way, you get to work different grounds as the tide goes out and only be 2 feet deep versus showing up all willy nilly like I did today and having to dive down, do tiny little shallow duck dives to work the bottom. Other things you need to do when going for clams is you need to check your season, you need to check your toxicity reports, and then the general pollution reports. You can typically do this by typing into Google the name of the beach you're going to and then clam season. One of the top Google results you should have should be the Fish and Game website for that specific beach. It'll have all the information I mentioned before as far as season, whether clams open, whether oysters open, and sometimes some reports on what can be found at that particular beach. On that page somewhere is also a map you can pull up, and on that map it'll show you beaches in the area that are also tested by Fish and Game, as well as the information for those beaches. This video footage was shot purely to show you how we do our clam diving. We didn't actually keep any of the clams that I have done in this video. Demonstration purposes only. All the clams you see as cooked later are from Dosey Wallops. When we do this, we typically find the clams just under the rocks and oysters. Do be careful not to bury the oysters. I have called Fish and Game about this particular method of harvesting. The silt that goes around and settles on top of them is not a concern. Clam Manila clam sizes are 1.5 inch minimum at its longest point. I would recommend going for the good 2 inchers. You're allowed 40 per person per day, and it is a lot more satisfying to have 40 large ones than the barely minimum size ones. Overall, that's clam diving. It's pretty simple. If you've got the gist of it, go ahead and run along now. If you're bored and want to see just a basic put together of how we like to steam our clams, let's stick around for that. I should also mention it does help immensely to know the beach that you're diving at relatively well. I have dove at several beaches that I had clammed during the required low tide before, and then I've also dove at beaches where I had never seen the bottom before, and it's definitely a lot easier to find what you're looking for if you have a good sense of where it's at. So again, we got our clams over at Dosey Wallops. We even got them weighed. I came in at about 900 grams for my 40. You know, I was told that was top 10 of harvesting amount for 40 that day. Not to brag. And the recipe that we're using today is your basic shallots, garlic, cilantro, white wine, and I added a little dash of lemon. Did I mention butter? Butter, of course, butter. And let me actually say this now because in my head, these are the ingredients I grab every time we do this. And we always regret that I forget the baguette. You need to have the bread. If your sauce comes out on point as it did today, you will immensely regret not having the bread. So add that to your ingredient list. I am working on my knife skills. Hopefully you two also can do this dish without getting any fingers or fingernails in there. I do like to have my garlic, shallots, and cilantro diced up finely enough so that whenever the clams open, I get a bit of all of that into every single clam for every single bite I have. We're going to start off with cooking our shallots and garlic first. You want to start this off with oil. I know the butter's sitting right there, but that butter's going to cook off before you really get any use out of it. So I like to do this portion with oil as I was taught to do. You're going to cook your shallots and garlic down until they become translucent. I myself like to put just a little brown on them. I like the flavor that that adds to it. You don't want to go overboard doing that, or you're just gonna have a bunch of burnt veggies in there. Oh, I should also mention that I am putting way too much garlic and way too much shallots in there for the amount of clams that we are using today. We are all having heartburn tomorrow. Actually, I still have heartburn now. We're a few days past this, but that's the way I like it, and that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. By all rights, you really should have your flame at a medium heat. I do have this on high. We're running out of daylight here, and I'm trying to be a little fancy with my high wall pan. Once your veggies are where you want them, it is time to add your wine. I am using a Pinot Grigio that is citrus forward. I don't prefer the ones that are fruit forward. It's just not to my liking. I have a pretty base palate, so if it's more to your liking, by all means, don't be afraid to use it. Along with my veggies, I intend to use too much wine. I'm starting off with a half bottle, and my intentions is to cook the alcohol out of it before doctoring up the base and then adding the remainder of the wine. Once you've cooked that alcohol off, it's time for the butter and salt. The butter is salted, so keep that in mind and don't add too much salt. You're also going to get some salt water out of the clams themselves. And just don't go overboard or you end up too salty. I have tried it without adding any extra salt, and it did feel like it was coming up short. I did work in a salt mine for 4 years, so that might have been why I thought that. Just keep all of these factors in mind as you play with this recipe. You'll notice in the background, I pulled the clams out of the water. Typically, we'll have them in a bucket and or bowl where I'll cycle the water out, allowing the clams to purge themselves as clean as possible. We tried it out with the mesh bag this time, and I'm happy how it worked out as well. You also want to keep in mind that you want to clean the outside of the clams. You don't want any mud, algae, extras ending up inside your food. I'm now going to add the remainder of my wine to the dish. At this point, I don't want to cook all the alcohol out of it. That's the goal. I don't end up achieving it. The idea behind this one is I want just that little kind of like vapor aroma in your mouth that the alcohol will give you, not necessarily the alcohol content itself. I think in the future to achieve this, I want to add it the same time I add the clams. So the story behind this fabulous shirt I'm wearing, we were at a luau in Hawaii. My brother-in-laws and I all wore the same shirt, this being it. And I've been determined to get more uses out of it. So I wore it surfing so far. It's now featured in this dive video. And I think the next step is it's going to go with me snowboarding. Once your base is set, it is time to add your clams. Two things of note when it comes to your clams. Before adding them to your base, you need to make sure none of them are open. This signifies that they're dead. Sometimes they're open if they're very cold because they've been sitting on ice or in the fridge and they're lethargic. In that case, tap on them, let them warm up, see if they close. If not, toss them. And then on the other side is once you have cooked them, if they have not opened, you need to get rid of them. That means they're dead. This is not a good thing to eat. You're gonna regret it and hate clams, and I don't want you to blame me for that. Clams are in. I toss all my cilantro in. This time I've added a quarter slice of lemon. I don't regret it. In fact, it's going in every time if I can ever remember it. Give it a toss, cover up, and let her cook. Hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it helps you put some yummy things out on the table for you and your loved ones. A shout out to Sam. As you see, I've stolen your wok holder for the grill, and I'm using it as a serving dish. I'll get that back to you soon, bud. Die safe, everyone.